Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a new webinar. It is my pleasure to bring you this webinar, which is titled Engage and Excel, Innovative Strategies for Teaching AP Spanish Language and Culture. We're excited to have Aubrey Swisher, 2023 Maryland World Language Teacher of the Year, and Caroline Schlegel, 2019 Maryland World Language Teacher of the Year, sharing their insights and experience with us. This is the first part of a series of 4 webinars that will be presented by them, and today they will focus on ideas for the AP class. By the end, we will inform you of the next webinar on the series. Aubrey, Caroline, welcome back, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate being here. We're excited to be back with KWL this evening. We love working with KWL, and we're really excited to share with you this evening Engage and Excel, innovative strategies for teaching AP Spanish language and culture. But it's not just for AP language teachers. We're talking about what happens when we begin in level 1 and vertically articulate our language program. So I'm Caroline Schlegel. And my colleague and best friend here is Aubrey Swisher, and we are excited to get going tonight.
All right, so what are we going to see tonight? The goal of this session was to help everybody understand the AP Spanish Language and Culture exam so that we can all confidently create scaffolded activities for our students where they are going to, we'll meet them where they are. We're going to meet them at their proficiency level and then help propel them further along in their proficiency journey. Ultimately, after breaking down the test, learning some innovative teaching strategies, and checking out the pedagogical materials that KWL World Languages has curated for us, you're going to see how those materials can make your job so much simpler, but the experience of your students so much richer. And then finally, after all of that, we hope that everybody walks away feeling comfortable and confident to design and implement their own learning experiences for their students in their classrooms that are going to foster communicative competence, cultural literacy, and again, start in level 1 and continue throughout all the levels.
Right. So first up, right, we're going to go with what does it look like for us in our curriculum and design. So we're going to look at planning and understanding what we're doing in our classrooms behind the scenes to make those things happen in our classrooms. And so a couple pieces here are at work, right? We have our guiding principles, and we have AP knowledge, and we add KWL in, and that's going to equal success for us in our world language classrooms. We know with ACTFL's guiding principles that we have to start with backwards design, which is why we believe that it's so important as language teachers to understand what AP looks like beginning in level 1, so you can inform your instruction and make pedagogical decisions that are appropriate for the level of your students and the proficiency level of your students in your classroom. If you combine all of those things together and you have resources in your hands, right, you ultimately are going to have a more successful AP program. And we're going to show you how we took KWL Reporteros and some of the things that we do in our own classrooms and how we built on that to create successful AP classrooms in our own respective schools. When you take a look here, right, we're talking about this 6 AP themes. I think it's really important, as Aubrey mentioned, to take a look at what is this test? What are students being asked to do? What modes of communication are they using? The answer is all of them, right? And so, but these are the things that should inform our instruction beginning in level 1. We're looking at global challenges. We're looking at personal and public identities, science and tech, beauty and aesthetics, families and communities, and contemporary life. And what those 6 themes look like in each respective level may be a little different, but it's really important to start hitting on them in level 1, because if the first time that they understand the 6 AP themes is in AP, it's too late at that point. We have to begin when our students are new to us, exploring these things, exploring culture and exploring vocabulary that is relevant to these 6 themes.
We were talking earlier, Caroline, about how attending the AP workshop, maybe even
Oh,
before you're an AP teacher, how that
mhm.
that is so enlightening. And it made us both better teachers. Knowing what those 6 themes are, but then also how much freedom they also promote in the classroom, because you can tie in just about any relevant, like current event, and it coincides with what your students are supposed to be learning and what we want them to be able to talk about.
Yeah, I had been teaching for 10 years before ever attending AP training, and I had taught 10 years of level 1 and 2. And when I went to AP training for the first time, albeit I was a bit overwhelmed, it was one of the best professional development pieces that I could have done for my career in terms of how I looked at what I did in my lower levels and how that informed what my students could then do in the future,
Mhm.
as they built, and it provides an opportunity for retention in classes because kids understand what they're supposed to do from level to level. They see common themes. And so if you haven't attended AP training and you are an AP teacher or you're not an AP teacher, I recommend, if you can get funding from your school, or even if not, to go, just because it truly is an eye-opening experience that made us better. It made me a better teacher.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we did mention before that knowing the exam is huge. It's going to help you to determine what skill sets to highlight and practice regularly in your classroom. And really, it's key for the instructor to create these experiences and assessments modeled off of the exam so that students can feel confident and comfortable with both the content and how they're going to be obsessed. Oh my gosh, not obsessed, assessed.
Well, it might be
Maybe they'll be a
obsessed.
little bit
No.
obsessed with their studies, but if you check it out, there are these different sections of the exams, and I'd love to share this with my students as well. We kind of practice in those time constraints as we get closer to the exam, and we're a little bit more flexible at the beginning. We just want to kind of dip our toe in and try out those multiple choice types of questions with different types of texts. Have students look at an infographic or a short article and then listen to something separately, see if they can take notes, and then take all of that information and make comparisons. Ultimately, then the free response section, this was what was really eye-opening to me whenever I attended my first College Board
I
professional
agree.
development. The the FRQs, the interpersonal writing, where they're going to practice doing an email reply. And really, that's so relevant to what students are going to be doing in their work fields. I know that probably prepped me for some of my professional interactions now. Presentational writing, they do a persuasive essay. I have had students grow so much in my own classroom, but also in their English and history classes because of the practice that we're getting in the classroom. The interpersonal speaking is actually my favorite to practice with the students. There's so many ways that you can sort of gamify this, or add a little extra spin to bring in a little bit of fun while still familiarizing them with cultural content and the format of the exam. But you're going to have a simulated conversation where students listen to a recording. They have to speak and respond every time a question is asked, and there's going to be a beep that starts them off, provides them with 20 seconds of time to attempt to fill, and then indicates that another question is coming up with another beep. So it's a really great way to have students begin to think on their feet and get ready for the real world whenever they go and talk to a heritage speaker, a native speaker, or they're traveling or studying abroad, not needing all of that extra time to process, but thinking, what are some filler words? How can I grasp, what I can, and begin communicating off of that? And then finally, we have the cultural comparison, which is my absolute favorite. And
Mhm.
I think, man, the purpose of the exam, creating these students, um, opening their minds, right? We have these global citizens that are going out into the world. We have these bigger goals, but this test also puts it there in small parts for us to keep us, going along the right path.
Absolutely. And learning how to do these things, it again goes back to what we were saying. This is not for the first time they're looking at replying to these emails and what the parameters are, how they have to respond. is in AP, at that point, we have missed 4 years or 5 years, depending on where your AP lands of study that could have prepped them. And so it's just so paramount for us to begin sharing these parts of the exam with our kids to grow our AP programs. This quote comes to us from the University of Bristol. And it says, language learning constitutes both a social and economic resource, both a social and economic resources, while the ability to move between linguistic and cultural systems has become a feature of everyday life. And so I think this quote, right, this research was done to address language learning, and it's often seen, it's an acquisition, as it's seen as a set of skills, right? It's seen as something that's isolated, and that it can be done without reference to the cultures that speak that language. And I think we could all agree as language teachers that with the University of Bristol, when they say that language learning needs to be this intrinsic part of the development of cultural literacy, and the understanding of the interaction of the cultural processes that surround these, think of the cultural products, practices, and perspectives, the importance that brings to us. Why are we speaking this language? Why do we need to communicate with other people? What do we need to understand about the world around us so that we can be more compassionate and empathetic, contributing members to a global society? And so all of this work, whether we're studying AP, this should be in level 1, and culture should drive our lessons always, right? Studying culture through the language.
Well, and we know that language and culture are inseparable. Language is deeply embedded in culture. By understanding the cultural context, students are going to grasp, more than just a literal meaning. They'll get some nuances, idiomatic expressions, and then the underlying values or traditions that shape communication and that culture to begin with. That's what we want. So it helps students to go, I don't know, in a more holistic understanding of the language.
And it also makes learning fun, right? These are it's the purpose of why we want to speak another language. It's to understand and participate in and grow in our own capacity. And it's what brings our classrooms to life.
Yeah, the students, I think their level of motivation is really there. When we're learning about diverse cultures, it makes everything relevant. It's engaging. Sometimes students have a harder time grasping language at first, but they can start to see through the different authentic resources. Maybe you have some videos, some audio, some text. They can see the language in action and start to understand bits and pieces of the culture. And it just makes it something that they can, relate to and understand. And then they can see that real life application in so many different areas like music, history, politics, current events we talked about before, being able to plug those in. And this beautiful graphic, this is another reason why everybody needs to find a friend, right? I was talking to Caroline. I was like, oh, I want to make like this new thing. Like here's some definitions that I want to give, like descriptions for products, practices, and perspectives. But I'd love to have like an updated, visual that plays off of Edward T. Hall's iceberg theory. And she is such a whiz on Canva. So she just started building our little iceberg, and I love it. If you're not familiar with this theory, Edward T. Hall compares culture to an iceberg. So you have only that small portion that we have in blue, right, is visible above the waterline, but there's a much larger invisible part beneath. And that just goes to say, I think it's about 10%, right? I think it's 1090. Only about 10% of a culture is observable and experienced, while the remaining 90% is made up of beliefs and perspectives held by the individuals in that society. And by the time we get to AP, you find out very quickly that knowing just the tip of the iceberg is not enough, which goes back to saying, let's start in level 1 so we can keep on building, right? And we're going to help develop that intercultural competence that our students so need. And again, it's what you need to dive into to really understand a place and its people.
And another piece that's really important to us with this cultural iceberg and why it was so important, if we're using this in a level 1 class or a level 2 class or 3 or 4 or 5, right? This dual coding that we've got these images so that the students may not 100% understand the definition under products, practices, or perspectives in level 1, but they can look at those images on that iceberg and they can identify items that exist within their culture that may relate to what's at la superficie, right? And then you can look right below the surface and students can start to identify things in their own culture in level 1 that may exist just right below that surface. And the same thing's true for the perspectives at the bottom there, the profundo, where we're having students, draw on their own lived experiences and what they believe in, why they believe in those things, their own perspectives. And that starts to build awareness of who they are as a human, because that is also a part of the AP Spanish language and culture exam, is being able to speak to your own experiences as compared to those in the cultures studied. So that dual coding is very important to us, and you'll see that consistently in our work.
All of the things that you're talking about them growing and developing, they also get that sensitivity and awareness that they need in order to interact respectfully and effectively with others from other countries. So I think it is one of the richest learning experiences that we can have.
Absolutely. So how do we do all of this? This is part 2 of this webinar. So after we've chatted about what this exam looks like, we want to put our rubber to the pavement here and really show you guys how we achieve this in our own courses. And so we've got some practical AP scaffolded learning activities that we've created that we're going to share with you. This is evidence and extensions from our own classrooms, things that we've done with our students that have helped grow their own proficiency and capacity to perform on the AP Spanish language and culture exam.
Okay, so you can see we're talking about what are scaffolded experiences to begin with. Scaffolded learning, that's that really essential piece, right? Because we're going to meet our students at their current level of understanding and then help them build up towards their mastery. It's going to be a more effective and personalized learning experience for the kids if we have scaffolded experiences. And scaffolding just comes from the idea of a scaffold. Think about building something. It's there to temporarily support something that is in the process of being built. We are in the process of building their cultural knowledge and all of their communicative skills at this level. So in education, scaffolding is going to offer the guidance to students while they're learning the new concepts. At the same time, you're going to be able to start to step back a little bit. Their creativity, their critical thinking, they're all expanding. And eventually, they're going to be able to do this without you. So their understanding increases and the supports are gradually removed, promoting independence and ownership.
Yeah. So we just want to ask you to take a moment to think about what AP scaffolded learning opportunities you've provided to your students, or do you plan to provide to your students? So we just want you to take a moment to think, frame your thinking as we present the things that we're going to share with you over the course of the next few slides. Think about your own classroom. Think about how you scaffold for these 4 FRQs or the multiple choice questions, and consider, how can you take what you're hearing shared here today and what Aubrey and I have found useful in our classrooms and support what it is that you're doing in your classroom, tweak it, change it, make it your own. We know that we're in the company of professionals. We're in the company of language educators who are here that want to better their practice, but who also have wonderful ideas in their own classrooms and things that are working. And so take our ideas, run with them. We hope they spark some bits of creativity, or that you can use them in your own classroom as is.
And we'd love to hear yours too. So as you're thinking of
Yeah.
the question, if you want to send us some ideas, we'd love that too.
Yeah, we love to share and we love to collaborate.
All right. So if you remember that first shot where we saw the exam, students are going to start off with multiple choice. And I know that can be daunting. I'm the type of person that if I have too much time to check my work, I erase the right answer and circle something else and then get my score back. Oh, I should have stayed. So this way that we're going to show you of approaching multiple choice for reading and listening, it's just one little exercise that we're going to help you out with. Hopefully the students will feel so confident in their language, what's being asked and what's being presented, that they won't go ahead and do that, make that eraser mark whenever it's not needed. So let's go ahead and check it out.
All right. Also, the biggest thing for me, right, you were just talking about time. That's my students' biggest piece, right, is the time management. My kids have the skills, right, but then you have to start to figure out how to use the skills and decrease the amount of time in which they have to perform those skills. So it's really important, to scaffold not only your exercises and your work, but also your timing for your kids so they can gradually get quicker at doing these things.
Absolutely. So this is from the AP Spanish Language and Culture binder. If you guys have seen this, if you've been to a training, you will have it. If not, you can simply search up College Board AP Spanish Language and Culture, and it's going to send you the framework for the course. And in that framework, you'll also see things about AP Classroom. If you go ahead and navigate to the next slide. And if we need to add links at the end of our presentation, we can certainly send those materials to you. But again, one of the things with the multiple choice, if you're not familiar, or even if you are, the students have to read varied types of texts. We've got infographics or an invitation to something. There's a letter, there's a literary work. And they're also listening to different things that include an interview, a recipe, varied types of things. Sometimes it's not the actual content that is having our students doubt themselves or being unsure of what the answer is. It's actually the language of the question and the response.
Yes.
So something that I started to do with my students is I wanted to see where they were, right? We have to meet them where they are. So I would go ahead and find something from AP Classroom. So grab any multiple choice activity. It can be reading or listening. I think for this activity, it's easiest to start with the reading because you'll be able to see all of the words. I go ahead and let my students try it within the allotted time. And they fill it out. It might be something with just 6 questions. It could be a snippet. I collect them, we score them, we give them back to the students. They try to collaborate, figure out, well, what would the right answer have been? And then finally, we have the discussion. Why do you think this was difficult? Or what did you not understand here? Is there language on this test that you think if you would have known what this word meant, you would have gotten this right? It was just this one word that was throwing you off. And so they'll go through, and it's so fun to give them the highlighter and you see what's happening in the actual text. But I have so many colored marks down in the questions and answers. What better way to get vocabulary that they're going to need to understand this exam and dominate, right? To really get it by seeing the samples from College Board and the language that they're recycling over and over in their types of questions asked. So one of the things that we can do, if you go ahead to the next slide,
Got it.
is using the Freyer model. We have a whole presentation on this, so I don't want to take up too much time, but the Freyer model, it helps students clarify meaning. It helps them to create these connections to aid in their retention. And it makes it so that their vocabulary is more readily accessible to them. You're going to see the different steps to it. We're just going to speed through, Caroline, so they can
You got
see.
it.
Perfect. So once they found their words, I have them write the word on a slide, put their name in presenter notes. They're going to define the word, try to find 3 related words, add an image. Some of them have to really stretch their minds for some of the words that they've chosen. And then finally, write an original sentence using the word. The original sentences can be used in so many ways during the class. The students can essentially create games or fill in the blank activities for their peers, but the students will be able to practice these words in context and start to create this like relationship with the word where they really begin to understand it, start to own it. And then it's wonderful to give them the piece back later on. You had never told them what the right answer was. You had just told them which ones were wrong. Now they understand the language, and we can see if they were right. If you knew these words, would you have gotten it? And it's a great positive experience. Can you go ahead and progress? Okay, so if you want to see what this looks like, I didn't want to steal College Board stuff and put it right here. So we just took a little sample offline that ties right into the early units of AP Spanish. So you're going to give them the essential text that's unfamiliar to students. You want them to read it, circle the unfamiliar words that they think are essential, not just like, oh, I don't know what this is. You think you need to know this word to really understand what's going on. Yeah, it'll alter your overall comprehension.
Yep.
And then there is the mini frame that shows you what the Freyer model actually looks like. And then finally, the last part is where they're using it, where we talked about they have to actually use it in context, create their own sentences. But it is, I think, one of the best things and easiest things that I have done to help my students on that multiple choice section, because it's very much the language of the exam that can prove to be difficult. And it's not that the students aren't prepared, that they haven't practiced reading or listening or even doing those terrible time constraints, right, Caroline? We coach them. But they just need to know those words and feel confident when they see them.
One of my favorite things about the Freyer model is that we do this digitally with our students, so they always have access to this. So you get a shared Google Slides deck with your kids, and each student has a blank Freyer model slide, and they put the word in the center there and create the work around it. But another student's on the next slide doing a completely different word, and the next student's on the next slide addressing a completely different unknown word prior to doing this activity. And so what happens is the students build this reference sheet for themselves, and they can look at these things over time. You can add to them, you could do separate ones, but they eventually, I have seen my students refer back to this, like, oh, I remember that word. It was on our Freyer model. Let me jump in real quick, open that link, look at it. And it's like, oh, that's what that word means. And I know that is, it's interesting, right? Because kids could just, quickly Google the word or whatever. But when they are working through it and committing it to memory and creating a sentence and writing 3 related words, that is helping us acquire language, not just look it up. It gives us the opportunity to put it in our long-term memory, to reference it, to remember that, oh, I used that previously. Let me jump back in and see what that was and how it was used. And so it's just a really great resource for our students to be able to reference over the course of the year or even years.
And how empowering, right? To take a word that you had no idea what it was actually tripping you up and completing what you wanted to do, but now you own it and you can use it. I mean, that's huge. It used to be your challenge and then you overcome it. This is a next step. So if you really want to hold your kids accountable, you're like, these are the words, guys. We need to make sure you're knowing these. This is a quiz template that Caroline and I made, and we love it. So you would just fill in the side column with all of those words. So there's like a menu for students to pick from. And then you're going to say, hey, select any 10 of these words, and I want you to write 10 original sentences using them in context. But here's the thing. You have to use it in a very clear context that also is modeling your writing skills.
Right.
We're not going to just have like me gusta sentences here. I need to know that if I'm looking at your quiz, I can put my finger over your underlined word and read around my finger. And by the time I pick up my finger, I should have the word in my mind that matches that. Mm-hmm. So if you let your kids know that, they do arrive, like they meet you there where you want them to meet you, and you get some quality things on this quiz that they're still in control of. They could have studied all of those words, but now instead of having that test anxiety, right? Focus on what you can do, what you can show me, and those words that you can put to use.
I always like to give my students proficiency level feedback on this too, right? I want, why I may have my students even look at this afterwards and reflect on where do you think your proficiency level is and why do you think that it's there? We want our students to become reflective practitioners just like us. So we want them to understand their work. We want them to reflect on their work and how that they can level up the next time they do this, or maybe where did they miss the mark? What should they focus on? And so this is a really great jumping point for kids when you put when we said the rubber meets the road, right? They have the opportunity to select the words that they want to use, but also they need to use it in a way that demonstrates that they're advancing on that proficiency scale. So what I expect my students to write in my level 2 class is going to be very different on this quiz than what I expect my students in my AP class to do, because it's appropriate for their proficiency level, which is why we love this template, because it is reusable over the course of the classes. Right. And here we've got kind of like, this is how, Aubrey mentioned with the Freyer model, the discover, understand, and use process. This is near and dear to our heart. It's our learning cycle that we plan all of our lessons with when we collaborate. We want our students to have the opportunity to explore language, that we want them to experience it. We want them to see it in natural context as it exists within the world before we ask them to do anything with it. It's so much better when students can make those little connections before you start asking them to do things with it. And then in the understand phase, we're giving them the opportunity. That's where our scaffolds come in, right? So this is where we as teachers are addressing the needs of our learners that are in front of us in our classroom based on their proficiency levels. So we're helping them to negotiate meaning. We're giving them those, maybe we're giving them the dual coding, the pictograms that are going with it. Maybe we're asking them to look at definitions and use circumlocution to try and relate other words. But this is where the meat is of trying to help students process the information that we're presenting, whether we're presenting vocabulary or whether we're presenting grammar. Both of these, this cycle holds true, right? We want students to discover it as it exists naturally in context, understand it with the scaffolds that we're applying, and then use it, which is when we start to take away those scaffolds and students can demonstrate their transfer of knowledge. So they can integrate what they've learned to something else. They can apply it. They can create something. They can extend their knowledge. They can make a cultural comparison. They can write an AP email. And the cycle goes, it's not just a one-way cycle, right? If we get to the use phase and we notice that our kids aren't really where we wanted them to be, we can make some adjustments and go back to the understand phase. And so that we're informing our own practices and what we're doing in our classrooms as we use this cycle. You'll also notice on here, we've got the little arrows forward, backwards. Those are our feed up, feed back, and feed forward. We want our students to have goals. We want our students to reflect on their progress, and then we want our students to decide on next steps. But we don't just want our students doing that. It needs to be the student to self, the teacher to student, and it also needs to be student to student. Students need to have the opportunity to connect, and peer feedback can be difficult. So you have to be very, very smart and very, very direct and explicit when you're teaching students to assess each other and the types of feedback that you want them to provide. So depending on the level, you can only ask them to do so much, but it's really, really a great experience for the kids when they're able to look at something and know or provide a positive, for their peers. So we love this cycle. And again, it drives our lessons. And everything that we do when we're looking at planning from level 1 to AP. And that goes right into, again, how about that, right? What a segue, 1 to AP. It goes right into our vertical articulation, right? So vertical articulation in our language classes, it's critical, it's essential in order to sustain successful advanced placement programs, to keep kids in our classes, to ensure that they feel like they can do what we're asking them to do, that they're prepared to do it, and they're doing it with cultural proficiency, they're doing with cultural awareness, they're doing it with language proficiency, they feel confident, right? This is exactly what we want, and that vertical articulation is the key to that.
It's what makes our classes and our department, right, thrive and grow and continue to be sustained in our buildings. We have to have that vertical articulation with that motivation and that excitement. And Level one of my favorite levels to teach, and those level one teachers, like you are the ones that are setting the tone and creating that curiosity and excitement and intrigue.
Right.
And then it's all of our jobs to continue fostering that so that our students want to come back to learn. And I think it's so gratifying to see students return and come back on your rosters.
Yeah.
And it might not even be an A student, but sometimes you'll ask, why are you taking the course? What are you interested in? I like to give my kids a survey at the beginning so I can kind of tailor what I'm going to do to what they're hoping to get out of it. And I have a lot of students that are so invested in culture and understanding other places and other people in the world, and kids that are eager to travel and to try something new. And it all starts in level one, and we have to just keep fostering that throughout all of the years.
Yeah. So we're going to switch gears here and show you the evidence from our field, right? So you're going to see the AP email responses up first. And so we're going to share, I know, I love the AP email response because email, Aubrey mentioned this earlier, but email is so relevant to who we are as humans in the 21st century, right? My students communicate with me. I have a kid sitting in the back of the classroom that will send me a message on Schoology instead of coming up to my desk, which then I walk over and share like, hey, us together, we could have had this conversation real quick. And they're like, it's just easier to email you and ask you, right? And so, but it's true, right? And also in a post-COVID era, right, communication, it was critical for us to be able to communicate with email, with text messages, virtually. And so this email response is so practical to me. It's one of the most practical FRQs on the AP exam, in my opinion. And we're really excited to share with you some of the scaffolds. So this is a lot on your screen at one time, we know, but we want to point out how we start scaffolding AP emails beginning in level one. So if you're in my level one class right now, you'll be taking a look at the left-hand screen, and this is something you will see. You are going to write an email reply. So we've got the instructions up top. Notice the time there, okay? 30 minutes to read the message and write a reply. Okay, that may be a very long time. Your kids may not have that long of a response, but it lowers the anxiety for students when they know they've got time to write. You can see that it models what's going on the AP examination. So you've got English on the left and Spanish on the right. This is pretty much verbatim what's on the AP exam. We want to model what our kids are going to see. We want to practice like we play, right? So I can't get better at shooting free throws by playing golf on the weekend. I got to practice like I play, right? So I got to go out and do the free throws. So if I'm looking at the introduction here, you can see the introduction is highlighted, but the introduction in our level one classes is in English. We think it's really important to make sure that the students understand the context of what they're about to reply to, because they're going to read the email that's in Spanish, and it's really important to give them direction. And then also have a list of success criteria. You can see in parentheses that we have in Spanish the success criteria there, but then the actual criteria, the check boxes, they're in English. We want them to greet the sender by name. We want them to ask how they're doing. And these are all the exact things that our students have to do when they're performing on the AP exam. When
We
you
want
look
to see here at this level that the students can do the task.
correct, yeah,
Not that they can understand the
The-
task written in Spanish, but that they can actually engage with somebody and do that. So again, that is why it's so important to make them feel comfortable and confident. It's going to make it so that they try and that they're able to perform at their highest ability.
Yeah. And what happens, right? So my kids will see it in level one and level two and level three, and they'll get to level five. They don't even need to look at the directions anymore. They're like, Schlegel, we've got this. Like, you don't
That's game changing though, because
Right.
really that gives them at least an extra minute on
Right.
the exam. If you don't have to take the time where it says you now have 1 minute to read the instructions for this task, they can drop their, was that pretty good?
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, you listened to that a time or two.
Drop to the actual theme or the scenario and start brainstorming right away.
Yep. Absolutely. And so again, you can see on the left-hand side here, scaffolds don't come on the AP exam like this, but we want to give our students some words that will help them create a response that reflects what they want to say. You know, just because our students are novice learners of language doesn't mean they're novice thinkers. They want to say things. And so it's really essential to provide them this set of words, these things that would help them communicate the messages that we know they have extra language for in their brain, but might not know how to start off. And you can see that these things are both in Spanish and in English to help them. We didn't just put them there in Spanish. We want them to use these, they're high frequency pieces, right? We want them to put the, and then tengo ganas, they write this. That's a what is the word I'm looking for that I can't find?
Idiomatic
Yes,
expression.
thank you. Idiomatic expression, right? It's something that gets used in the language. How great to see that in a level 1 class and be able to put that in your writing at this point. Notice as you read the email that they're going to be asked to respond to, there are some bolded words in there, right? That go over to what is also in that left-hand column. So the students can reference that as they work to understand the AP email and the content that has been written to them. And then hopefully it cues them into using that language that's in that column to write their response, right? And
In this format, it's no longer like solely an assessment. It's a learning experience in itself. It's a tool. So I think that's great that they may be engaging in this activity. It might even serve as an assessment in your classroom, but they're going to be picking up these new phrases and these words that hopefully they can hold on to and use later on in the future.
yeah. So if we look at the level 2 task here, we've changed some things, right? So we've got the introduction, we've got all of this stuff up top is the same, but now we've added this additional piece because they've gone through level 1. They've chatted about present tense verbs. They know our subject pronouns. They know who usted versus tú is. And so when we get to this level 2 one, we're asking them to use the usted form here, right? And so you can see we still have got the scaffolds on the left-hand side, but those verbs are no longer conjugated for the students. They're in their infinitive forms. We still have underneath some vocabulary to help the students, right? The English to help cue them in, because again, we're trying to build their confidence in responding. And this is an email that was about a real estate agency, and that's what kids were studying. So they were asked to do all these things, check them off, still with scaffolds here, right? The directions and the success criteria are still in English. And then we move to our Spanish 3 on the left hand here, and you can see some things have changed. Namely, the time at the top. We've now taken away 5 minutes from our students. So you only have 25 minutes to complete this task now. The introduction is there, and it is in Spanish, right? It is in Spanish on the Spanish 2-1, right? And it's short, a little longer here. And then you've got the success criteria again. And then you move to the email itself. We do not have any scaffolds on the left-hand side of this. So students at this point should be able to use the email itself and the context of the email to pull out the things, right? At this point, they know they have to use a greeting. They see the greeting in the email. They know they have to introduce. There's an introduction in that email, right? They know they have to respond to the 2 questions that are bulleted in that email. It's their closure, signature, all of it's modeled within that text. So although it's not on the left-hand side with the English, it is still modeled within the content of the email that's being presented. And then if we move to level 4, we only have 20 minutes in level 4 to write this AP email because we're working up to that AP exam, and we have 15 minutes to write an email in AP. 20 minutes is good for our students in level 4. So you see that we've got the introduction, but we've removed the checkbox. My students will write the checkbox themselves at this point, right? Because they're so used to having it. So they go through and just jot down real quick what it is that they need, and they check it off on their own as they're doing this task. They're asked to respond to it. The questions are embedded, and the students are given 20 minutes to do that.
So after breaking down all those complex tasks, right? That's the gradual release of responsibility where the teachers, we were offering all of that guidance and support at the beginning, and then we're stepping back, right? We had all the modeling and explaining and examples. And then finally, students will have been practiced with these skills and the format. So they have gained that confidence and that understanding. And we can now reduce our level of assistance and just let them soar, encourage them to go off, and they're responsible for what they can do at that point, and they know all of the ingredients, all of the required things, that success criteria to excel.
Yep. So we also like to, Aubrey and I are very big on having our students create work and use work. And very briefly, just want to share with you guys something that we do with our students. So we have our students participate. We call this el correo en vivo, right? And so we have students write their own introduction and create their own context. Who's talking? What are they talking about? Why are they talking? What is the purpose of this? So they're writing their own brief introduction, like we saw on this right back here, right? This organización voluntaria. They write their introduction, and then they are actually going to write the email that someone else is going to respond to. So we want them to present themselves, explain why they're writing, ask 2 questions, right? So this is another way for students to become familiar with what's required in that AP format. They say goodbye, they sign it, they write that email, and then, right, we're going to find a partner and we're going to exchange these emails. You're going to read the theme and introduction. You're going to have 1 minute to do that. The teacher's going to write, or I'm sorry, not going to write. They're going to set a timer for 15 minutes, right? You read the email. Now you're responding to the email. And when that timer stops, you're done, right? This is the response sheet, right, that their students are writing on. So once the timer stops, they stop writing on this one. Remember here, you see they do have the list, the checklist. This is where they're responding to the email that their classmate wrote, right? And when they're done writing it, there's a reflection piece that's involved here, right? We said that reflection is really important to us. So did you greet the sender, right? We're self-reflecting here. Did we greet the sender? Did we use a lead-in introduction? Did we respond to all of these questions? Did you sign the email? And remember that that's a formal piece, right? Did those things happen? And then also the partner will evaluate that. Okay, so you're getting your self-reflection and you're seeing the partner evaluation. The AP scoring guideline.
To the quality.
Yeah,
So you're seeing if it's there or not, but look at that, like, kind of, you can say it's there, but it's not great versus the thumbs up. So I think that's great feedback for the original writer to receive.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back real quick, I know I had a quick question to show that. This is the first one where they write the introduction and then they write their own writing piece, right? They're writing the original email that would be the AP email task. They're writing the task, they're creating the task. And then
so they're learning how to write the test, how to be the test at the beginning.
Yep. And then responding to the test and evaluating, as we said. All right. Oh my gracious, it's 6:47. Where does the time go? Woo!
I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So we're moving on to the simulated conversation. Again, this is where you've got the beeps. Kids have to think on the fly. And if you just throw them in, oh my goodness, throw them in the first time and there's questions coming at them with a beep and some sheet telling them that they have to reject or make a suggestion, they're going to be so overwhelmed. So we want to make sure, again, that we're starting in level 1. And just like Caroline had showed you what we did with the email task, we did this with the simulated conversation so that it is more comfortable. And we know that at the very beginning, students are they're just acquiring the language, right? It's very fresh for them. It's
Brand
very
new.
new. Yes. So that's part of it. They need a little bit of thinking time. So you can see we're starting off here. It doesn't say the time limit. The introduction it's there in Spanish, but it's pretty simple. But although it says it's the speaker, you can see what the speaker said. It's more like a text conversation, really, right? And then you know what you have to do.
Yeah.
And
And what I love here. Oops, sorry.
the next time, what they're going to say. So if you have an audio to go with it, they can hear and read it, or they can just practice reading at the beginning. But they've got that time to look at the language. Again, they've got a model of language, a little reminder, and it's telling them what to do. Something that is huge. Again, we don't want them to get stuck not understanding the task itself or what they're being asked to do. So instead of just telling them or respond, whatever you have in your target language, we have it in parentheses in English so they can get familiar with what language is going to be in this task on this little skeleton that they give us to guide us. But right now, you can also see what that means. So you can feel confident that you're doing what you want to do. You're doing what you're being asked to do, and you can complete that. The students get to write out their response here. I think this is very low risk, low stress.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You can see what happens whenever we slide over to the next one. So this is Spanish 2. If you take a minute to look, can you see the big difference? We took away the English, but look, that language is still very familiar, and it's not much different from what they will see the actual day of the AP exam. So they got a full year or semester, right, of seeing these types of instructions and knowing what they meant. They got to see the Spanish and the English. Now they should feel confident that they know what they're being asked to do, and they're not too surprised because they can still read the conversation. They can still read the text.
I also love, you mentioned earlier, part of the text is, or part of the issue with the test sometimes can just be the instructions. So if you're beginning in level 1 with understanding what the instructions mean, by the time they get to the exam, they will not be confused on the language of the exam itself. They will have confidence in approaching those instructions.
And the format itself will be so familiar and comfortable. Sometimes that's what gets students, whether they're, adolescent or adult, whenever you're in that testing situation and something's coming at you and it's new, you can kind of get, that jittery feeling, those nerves. But here, the format of the test is not going to be an issue. The language should also feel good. It should feel comfortable. All right, so this is moving on to 3. You can see, oh no, what? You really stepped it up. Yes, we did. You guys are ready, right? They still have their introduction. It's put out there. It's very comprehensible. And then they have their 2 steps. They're going to listen to the audio the first time, and they can write notes for 20 seconds. Then they'll listen to it again, and this time they're going to respond out loud when they hear the tone, and they're going to practice starting to speak when the tone sounds and stopping whenever it sounds again. So that is a lot of growth, but they are comfortable now with what they're supposed to do, and they just have to practice listening and now forming their thoughts. They have that little support, right, where they can brainstorm first. We're going to take it up a notch for Spanish 4. There's their introduction, but some things have changed in these steps. It just says review the schema, the schematic, instruction sheet, and then respond when you hear the tone. So we're in it. The kids, they're getting their practice in Spanish 4. This is for us, our pre-AP level. So if you were going to have your AP as your Spanish 4 class, we would suggest starting with the Spanish 3 scaffold that we have on the left for the first half of the year, and then transitioning to what we have marked as the Spanish 4, because now they're going to focus on listening, beep, respond, beep, stop, listen again. And so it's going to make them get very comfortable and familiar with this part, whether it becomes a favorite one or a dreaded one. They will know what to expect and kind of like, those secret little things that they need to include to do well.
I do want to jump back really quickly to the level 3 one, because I just want to focus. There's one additional scaffold here. The quienes llegaron para ayudarles a los heridos, right? So they might not know what's going on. Maybe they lose it a little bit, right? But right here in the middle, the question is written for them, right? So that they can hear it and maybe get back on track there. So that's an additional scaffold in that level 3 piece that is there to help the students stay on track or get back on track or clue them in. So that's an additional piece that's there that you do not see in the level 4 text. And then
it really does refocus them, because sometimes they understand what was being asked even, but they realized they didn't answer it fully. And they tried to keep answering the old question, but that's right there to say, hey, buddy, this is what we're asking
Focus
you.
now.
Yeah, get back on track. Tell us this. All right. And then again, we love to have those fun experiences with the kids. AP, although you're teaching the test parts, it doesn't have to be dry or isolating. Everybody's by themselves just speaking. You can make it interactive and it makes it more fun. Also, if you're having the students attempt to write the exam, make an activity like it, they are starting to think like the test makers, and then they really understand the structure and the language used. So this is very similar to what we did with the email. You have the in vivo, so it's live. The students are going to start off by creating a context for the conversation. Students always receive that on the test as well. And then they're going to come up with their guide, and they're going to model it off of samples from College Board, from the actual AP exam. You can see that they're going to create the guide, and later on, they are going to have a chance to rate responses. Yeah. Okay, so here's where they're creating the conversation. And there's all of the instructions again. So they're going to find a partner, provide them with the scenario and the schema, give them 1 minute, just like they would have on the exam, to review it. And then they're going to begin the conversation. Person A is the simulated conversant. They're the person that would be the recording. So they get to read their script. That's why they prepared it, so that they can try to just flow like the recording would. They're going to try to read it clearly and at a normal rate of pace, making a beep to indicate that the full question has been posed. And then they're going to have a stopwatch to start ticking away at the time while their peer is going to attempt to answer the question and fill those 20 seconds.
Yeah.
As the person responds, right? The student that made the test knows what they were saying and what they were asking. So they will know if their peer is actually answering what they've been asked. So they get to go ahead and circle the thumbs up, the sideways, or the down to say whether they think the response was good or strong. Oh,
Sorry.
fair or weak or poor. And then it's great because this is an example. I saw something pop up earlier. Do you think feedback is able to be done in larger classes? Absolutely. This is something that's going on in the classroom. It doesn't matter if you have a class of 8 or 26 or 34. You have an odd number, you get to go ahead and participate. Just make sure you're trying the task out with different kids. It's super fun actually to do it with them, and whenever they're quizzing you and they're rating you, and it's a really good experience. So I love the feedback portion, and the students are really trying to deliver.
Yeah, I went back here, just the feedback that our students give, right, is over here on the first sheet where they created the script, right? So they're listening to the person respond after they make this schema here, and then they're rating as they listen to the person as they're responding, how they feel like their answer was. Just a little way to have students provide feedback. Here's some practical things, jumping in quickly to the argumentative essay. This is something that I believe was an ML strategy, but it's really something that you can do. Like, you can do it as a warm up. You can do it as something as a closure. You could do it in the middle of a lesson to check for understanding. But it's a way to get kids to level up their language usage and think about trying to form an argument here. So I like to do something, but I would like to do something because, and then I would like to do something right? And this is an actual example from one of my students, so it makes me giggle a little bit. But this is a really nice way to have students just kind of quickly interact and form arguments and give more details, provide more details. We know that leveling up our language comes with using transition words. It comes with using advanced grammatical structures. It comes with using connector words. And so this is a really great way to kind of slip that in lower levels and allow students to be able to justify their responses. Another piece that's really important to us, and we love this format, and this is something that we use beginning in level 1, where, you know, we know the argumentative essay has 3 sources, right? There's something that's an audio source, there's something that's like usually a chart or graph or an infographic, and then there's a reading piece, right? And so we want our students to start to investigate 3 sources on the same topic beginning in level 1. So we will share a video, we will share an infographic, and we will share a reading, and the students will jot down the pertinent information on that. You can do this in a jigsaw way, even if you want to. So you can give a video to one part of the class, an infographic to the other part of the class, and the reading to the final part of the class, and you can pair people up different ways so that they can provide information. And then there will be questions that follow that would require students to have interpreted and gathered information from all 3 resources. Oh, we love that
This
one.
is something that whenever you're planning, maybe you feel a little bit overwhelmed, like trying to find all 3 of those pieces. So that's why I love to play and find things on my own. Caroline and I collaborate, but also you're going to see what CLET does for you. They use
Yes.
all of those authentic resources, curate those authentic resources for you, and they every lesson, right?
Yes.
They have their units divided, and there are infographics and videos and readings that are all tied together with the theme. So those students are getting those materials from the get-go. And, you know, sometimes it's hard for us to do on our own, but it's
Yes.
great to know that those are actually authentic resources. You can even like see the source and type in the URL that they have cited, and it'll come up. And so it's great.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite things about the CLET world language and the Reporteros text is that it made it easy to pull the resources that they were using, share them with the
Mhm.
students. And then all I had to do was print this and kids wrote it down.
Oh,
Or I didn't print it. I just said video infographic, go.
right,
It
right.
made it so easy,
Fold your
right?
paper into 3 columns, yes.
Yep. Yep. Divide into 3, right? This is another way, right? You can start to scaffold for an argumentative essay here where we're looking at, you know, the question, right? Our position statement, right? What is our thesis? And then we're looking at these 3 pieces right here from the article, from the infographic, from the video. What 3 things or what can you pull from those pieces to support your postura? And then what things are you pulling from it that are going against your postura, and how can you use those things, right, to create the introduction to your argumentative essay? I don't always have my students write the entire essay. In level 3, we focus on the introduction. In level 4, we start focusing on building body paragraphs. And this is something that came from one of our level 4 classes here. So we're taking that information from that resource that we just looked at. And in level 4, students are writing collaboratively here, right? So put them into groups. One group writes, everybody has a Google slide that they're working on, and you can do this on paper too, now that we're back in person, right? You could do this on paper. Each group writes, collaborates to write an introduction. And then you pasa la postura, right? You pass your postura to the next table. You read the introduction, and the next group has to use that introduction to then formulate the first paragraph. Once that part's over with, we pass it again. The next group reads introduction and paragraph 1. Now you've got to write paragraph 2. And so you can see this is an actual example. This is actually from Aubrey's class, I think. But it's an actual example of the students, and as they're collaborating, they're reading, they're also getting different points of view, right, from different groups. They're having to write either, you know, maybe their group decided to take one position, but now they've got a paper in front of them that has another position. So it forces them to think about how to combat maybe an altering point of view within their argument or a different way of thinking. And so this was really great. Students pass the essay until it's complete, and then we reflect individually and pick one to review as a class to clean up, right?
It is less intimidating this way. It's more interactive. Students get to kind of combine forces. And as Caroline said, they're thinking nonstop. If you think about it, they're starting off with their own introduction, trying to form this argument. And then all of a sudden something else comes and they have to read again and think again and reassess. So they get so much practice in this one activity, but it seems a lot more fun than if they come in and you say, all right, we're going to do an argumentative essay. Make sure you start with a thesis. I want you to do all 3.
How boring.
Breaks it down into chunks that seem manageable. And one of my favorite things to do, like you can see this one almost finished. I will also have my students try this out on their own. I'll say, pick your favorite. Everybody pick your favorite essay, and I want you to turn it into your own. So the conclusion is all you, but also you're going to be held accountable for everything else that's in it. So if there's errors that you want to change them. If you think that you can add a point that's stronger, go ahead and tweak that argument. If you think they need to cite something, so then it is wonderful to display them then without student names on them too. And that's another way that they can have anonymous feedback. They can see what the same starting point turned out to be in the end and see what makes a stronger argument. What are the things that really stand out here? And it's something that really sticks with them. They remember this experience. Again, it's not as intimidating. It's a little bit fun. It can be competitive. And then the next time that you say, okay, we're going to do an argumentative essay, since you broke it down in rounds by paragraph, they remember what they need for each part. And it's good. They're just piecing it together.
Another really great thing that you can do here is you can take each of these and you can, put them on the wall. You can do a gallery walk with them and you can have students go through and like highlight parts. Here's the thesis, right? Here's the conclusion. Here's source 1, source 2, source 3. So going back to the instructions on the AP exam, having to include those things, go back to the instructions, have students identify those pieces in this collaborative essay. Oh,
Something
my favorite.
fun is like cut them apart.
Yeah.
Put like 3 of them apart,
Put
and
them in
then
order.
the rubric and say, build me a 5. Take these, build me a 5. And that's a lot of fun.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, cultural comparison. This is my kids, my students are always like, oh geez. As soon as I promote this section, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite part. This is the reason why we're here. But I do really think they end up loving it as much as I do. This, I think, is the reason that we have the course, right? This is what relates to the real world and makes our students, have that broader lens, and they can walk away with more than just language here. They have this deep, rich understanding, and it is something that is going to aid them in their life for years to come.
Yeah. Yep. So you saw this earlier, right? Aubrey shared this cultural iceberg that we've got here. So this is a screenshot of a document that we share with our kids. And you can see it just says the source, the country, the continent. So again, we're having students identify the geography, right? What country are we focusing on? What continent is it on? And then you can see we've got products, practices, and perspectives. Pretty self-explanatory there. Whatever source we're investigating, the students are looking for products, practices, and perspectives that would go in there from the source, right? And then this is for our lower, not actually, I did it with my level 3, so it's not even lower level. Beginning of the year, coming out of Spanish 2, my kids need this. We need to practice the language to make a cultural comparison with accuracy. And so you can see I've got products, practices, and perspectives here. And we have some little sentences, some sentence starters, some stems, something to give them some confidence, language we want them to acquire, to make their own. Pick what it is that you want to use it below, right? They're going to write 3 sentences to describe, right, that cultura evidente and that cultura profunda del país, right, from whatever country it is that we were looking at. So it's a nice scaffolded way to get students looking at the source and then thinking about products, practices, and perspectives. But then we take it up a notch here, where we're actually going to give one, get one, right? And so if you've not done this before, what happens is you have one thing in your brain, right, that you're going to share with someone else. So my students write that one thing where it says, lo que le doy a mi compañero, right? Then that's the thing that they're going to share. They're going to find a partner. They're going to share the thing, right? They are going to write down what their partner shares with them in this second box right here. And they're going to identify whether it was a product, practice, or perspective that they shared, right? Then they're going to find another partner and they are going to share what their partner told them. So they're not sharing their original idea. They're sharing what they got from their partner, right?
They have to practice their listening skills.
Correct, right? And so they write that down. And then they look at the products, practices, and perspectives, and they make a comparison between their culture and the culture that is being studied in the source. And there's a model there for our students to create that initial cultural comparison piece, which my kids really enjoyed doing this. Like I said, we just did this in my level 3 class a couple weeks ago, and we were focusing on Colombia, and this was something that was really great. They felt like they were empowered to do it because they had the language and the scaffolds there to support them, and we were able to do that.
This one is leveled up. It has less of a scaffold, but again, it looks familiar. It's to say, you've done this before. You can do this. You know these things. But you can see we still have the products, practices, and perspectives presented up in the visual, but now they have something that they're going to do to get themselves warmed up. We have a few things provided there. We're going to say, can you classify what would be a product, a practice, or a perspective? And you want to go over this part, I think, because this is going to make sure that all of your students are on the same page. And I think it's very important that, again, they're going into an activity, into a task, understanding what they need to have. They understand the tools and they understand the expectations. So here, if they can categorize the products, practices, and perspectives, you can go over them, make sure everybody's in agreement. You're ready to move on, and students are ready to delve into a culture of their choice, perhaps. This is where we're not providing them all the same source, but maybe they can do some independent study. For example, my students are using this for Hispanic Heritage Month, and they're each focusing on a different country and then building us a presentation so that we can learn a little bit more about the culture. If you want to go to the next slide. So you can see they're going to name their country, tell us where it is. And then you can see with the products, wow, it's not just the tangible, but the intangible. So list 5 tangible products and 5 intangible ones. And we've got some examples there again, because we want them to be familiar with all these things that exist, and that a product doesn't have to just be something that you can see and touch. You move on to the practices. Here they have to identify and describe 5 practices, 5 cultural practices. So they really have to know some information here. And then finally, identify and explain 3 values, beliefs, or attitudes. They're going to go ahead through here, and we're going to try to find 3 things that can be interrelated. So a product that is related to a practice that goes back to a perspective held within that culture. So that is what this step 4 is. If you keep on moving on, Caroline, I know we're short on time. I'm trying to go fast. They're going to do their analysis and reflection. This is really going to help them not only with their writing skills, but to prepare them whenever they're speaking, to be able to make those connections. And lastly, here's another example. Go ahead and flip. Another time where they can interact with a peer, get some feedback, see where they're falling on the proficiency scale. I love that they're going to have a partner that will exchange papers with them. They're going to revise it. They're going to let their peer know, like, this is where I think you are with your language, and this is what's really great. This is maybe what could boost it. And then finally, they're going to do a presentation. They're going to experience their peers' presentations, and lastly, collaborate to see, okay, thinking about the United States, right? If that's your own culture, that's where we teach. So we're saying, how can we compare the US to this other country? They're going to try it with 3 different countries. What is a similarity and what is a difference? And that will help to create that knowledge base that they need. Funny enough, whenever we do the cultural comparison, the challenge is for my students to think about the culture of the United States.
Yes.
They will happily learn things about all of the Spanish-speaking cultures, and if we're visiting Latin America, if we're in Spain, they love to figure out those products, practices, and perspectives, and they are ready to talk on that theme, using the information they know about those countries. But you have to compare.
Right.
And most of them are comparing to the United States, and they stop and I don't know what to say. So here, right from the get-go, find me a similarity, find me a difference. We can see that these things exist, and it's going to make it so they have a little bit of something already in their pack so that they can pull from it come time.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to reporteros. I think we
Yeah,
should
let's
just,
go to it. We're going to go past
let's
that.
do here.
So this is
Okay.
the most important part, right? This is why we're here, because Reporteros makes this so easy for us as language teachers. They're providing relevant, like new, up-to-date things for us to use in our classroom. So how do we get students there? This is why we love Reporteros, right? We have these authentic materials. It's AP exam informed, right? Look at this in every book in Reporteros. There is the AP correlations guide. You can figure out on what page these themes exist, right? And then the sub themes are there. It's Reporteros 1 has it, Reporteros 2 has it, Reporteros 3, Reporteros 4, right? And then they have the scaffolds. Okay, so this is what's happening in this book, right? Here's an AP email scaffold right off the bat in the get-go in level 1. They've got an email there, and we're going to look at it. We're gonna think about it. I love the strategies that Reporteros puts on the side here, because that gives our students something to think about. This language is accessible, right? It tells them it's going to make your language more free-flowing. And we've got all of this culture embedded in. We're driving what our students are learning by leading with culture. And we've got cultural comparisons that exist through this first chapter we're looking here.
I
There's
love how simple with the email, it just said reply to the 2 questions.
the
Because
end.
that's a part that the kids sometimes don't get on the AP exam. Look for those questions, go.
Yeah. So here we're looking, this can help us with multiple choice, right? They're listening, they're trying to identify, they're looking for things, we're trying to clue them in. Again, back to the cultural comparison here. And this is asking them in pairs, just in pairs, really quickly, share something, right? What are the similarities and differences between this? And Aubrey just said, right, the kids have trouble thinking about their own, right? Right here, it's having students off the bat think about the characteristics of their own home as it relates to homes that exist in other countries. There's more email and conversation. We've got more multiple choice, this reading, this graph that's here. In level 1, students are looking at this graph. They're having to identify information in this graph, decipher information, and think about, they're clued in with those 3 questions up there. You know, how many hours do women spend doing chores versus men? And you know, they're able to take key information from these things, teaching map skills, teaching graph skills, teaching things of that nature. That is our responsibility as language teachers, to help them access this. But think about how that transfer of knowledge that exists, right? Helping students read these charts and graphs and infographics is not just a skill that exists in Spanish class, it's a skill that exists in life and in every other class that they're in, right?
And we can't assume what they're learning in the other classes. So a lot of times it's not the language, it is just having the techniques to understand the information in that format.
Yeah. And then again, cultural comparison, this nuestras culturas portion that's in the end of every part of the chapter really has students kind of hone in looking at in Mexico versus in your country, right? In a community, in a Chicana community versus in your country. Like it's allowing students to have that time to think. And again, the estrategias that go alongside of what we're asking students to do here are so helpful and so necessary for kids as a scaffold in these lower levels. And also the strategies change over the course, right? So that it's leveling up with the proficiency of the students. So you'll still see estrategias through all of the versions of Reporteros 1 through 4, but the estrategias are aligned more to the proficiency level of the student and gives them a little bit more to think about leveling up. Again, emails, charts. We've got
Let's
multiple choice.
can you skip to, let's check out 2.
Yeah,
Because I know
let's do
you're
that.
short on time, but
Oh, here
this
we
is
go.
great. You guys are going to get a copy of the slide deck, so you'll be able to see them in full. And I also saw that you can request a sample of Reporteros, which 100%, please do that. All right, so here's 2. Think about what you saw in 1. We'll try to go a little bit faster, but you're still going to have those charts and graphs. The cultural comparison is there. This is familiar, but if you didn't notice, the instructions were in English before in the level 1 book, and now we are going to Spanish. So we're taking that baby step. taking one of the scaffolds away, but this is still geared towards their proficiency level.
I
So
also love here that notice that although the scaffolds are away, look at the bolded words for the verbs. These are what our students are being asked to do. So it's giving those students the visuals of the commands, what it is they need to do.
Right, same thing. We have that email response present. There are IPAs always present in the book. There's a practice in the book. There's an official assessment. So you have plenty of examples that you can pull into your classroom. But the students, again, have the strategies on the side. They have the instructions. And it's a shorter message that they're responding to. Cultural comparison. Again, we have nuestras culturas. You can see that they get to choose. They have choice. They get to complete the table beforehand, write a paragraph in order to compare and contrast. And then there's also a speaking step or speaking option. Go ahead and keep rolling. I can't wait to get to 3 and 4. Multiple choice. That is so important. So if you saw the one, yes, we have the multiple choice with listening. That is good. We need our kids to be able to pull details and to find evidence from the audios to support what their answers are going to be. I saw on one of the next pages, did you go forward or backwards?
Forward.
Oh, I think it was backwards, but it was a literary example, which there we go. Ooh,
there it is.
Right? This is great because sometimes that's not what we're pulling into our classroom on our own on a regular basis. And instead of you having to search for a literary work that is suitable for the theme, the context, and also for their level of understanding, Reporteros has it for you. And there were the little, why am I like audio phones, earphones, right? That was in the corner because the students can also listen to it as they read along. Yes. And we know that that really increases their comprehension. Again, you're going to see some familiar things. Keep on going, Caroline.
You got it.
There you go. Listening comparisons. You can see how frequently they pop up because it's routine, it's normal, and it happens each unit, each lesson in each unit.
Yeah, and scaffolds again in Spanish 3. I want to lead here with the annex parts, like the los anexos. So there are additional scaffolds in each of the Reporteros text. So in the back of the Reporteros text, you will get all of this information that's here per chapter of or per unit of study and the lessons, so that students can have useful conversational information. And again, that's in level 1 through 4. So students have access to that if they need some additional support in how to have a conversation or they want those direct scaffolds there for them. There's also ancillary materials that come with Reporteros that have incredibly useful things for us. You know, look at this. This is from the workbook, and this is an email. It's a presentational. I'm sorry. This is not. I mislabeled this. This is not an email. This was presentational writing, right? So they are responding to these questions here. So this was the argumentative essay, right? So what is the social network, right? Who is this directed to? So they're having to break down and evaluate the presentational writing piece here, which is really great. They're looking at the questions and responding to them. There are more scaffolds here, the cultural comparison, right? Presentational speaking. If we're just practicing, this one isn't necessarily directed towards the cultural comparison, but rather, or directed towards the conversation, but rather just the practice of speaking and recording and being oral in the classroom, right? Interpersonal writing tasks. And then we jump to the book where you see we're looking at emails again and charts with audio and combining those things and a debate. What a great structure and scaffold a debate is for an argumentative essay, forming an opinion, working together as a group, presenting that argument. And Reporteros lays all of that out for you to structure what you need to do on the AP exam. Again, Nuestras Culturas exists. We're looking at emails here, interpersonal speaking conversations, more authentic resource. I mean, how rich is this text? It is loaded with authentic resources, multiple choice readings, cultural comparisons. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And then Reporteros for Aubrey, I'm gonna
oh my gosh, I'm using this right now. It's gorgeous, right? To start off, I was so excited. And you notice whenever you get this book that it's a little bit different. It is not set up exactly like Reporteros 1 through 3. Those used to have like 2 lessons per unit. This one flows. You can tell that it's made for a student that has that practice and that background. And now we're ready to see if we can dive a little bit deeper and kind of have a little bit more independence. It's a little bit, it's I don't know, it's elevated, but so good. Again, you have all of these rich materials. You have the infographic, and the infographic you were even able to listen to. And you had those questions where students had before, during, and after exercises so that they can see how to approach the material in a strategic manner, and then how to understand it and how important it is to be able to justify your responses. That is a huge thing in the level 4 book is, well, you can see it right there. It tells you, right? You have to justify your responses. So we're looking for those details, for those answers, but we have to go back and say, this is how we know, this is where we got it. I do love that the grammar and vocabulary is not taught explicitly. There are these little reminder boxes. And the really cool thing, right? I love whenever the kids are discovering things themselves, using their critical thinking skills, making these language comparisons. They will have these little portions where you have to look at 2 sentences or varied expressions, and you have to determine what is the difference here? What could this possibly mean? And then they put it back on the student and say, your turn, you try this out. And there's always an interactive piece. Go ahead, Caroline. Next. All right, simulated conversation right here. You can see that you have options here. They can just listen to the audio. You also have the script. Okay, so you can differentiate for your students.
Somebody asked earlier if we made the audios or where did we get them. Reporteros makes it easy with level 4 because they're in here for you. We have used previously native speakers or other Spanish teachers or colleagues who may be Spanish teachers to help us record the scripts that we create.
And to have a variety of accents and dialects represented. The email, I love how it breaks it apart. It has the numbers, and then look at the small square that's going to map it out for them. And it tells them like, this is where this goes. Next, you're going to do this. Next, you're going to do this. But it doesn't give them as much language. The students can reference vocabulary that's provided, but it's really just remember the structure. Now you go ahead and do it. Go ahead and keep flipping. I know we're really tight for time.
I know, like this is all, again,
it's just beautiful. Amazing. The cultural comparison, again, they do this for the argumentative essay. I will make sure that you see both of those, but it is wonderful. And this is something that the students can have with them to remind them, to walk them through these skills. If you're saying, oh my gosh, I'm an AP teacher and I never did AP training, I didn't even know about this task before. It's teaching you at the same time and showing you how to present it to your students. Same thing if maybe your students, you knew about it, but you can only get the funding for the AP teachers to have the training, and maybe your lower levels didn't know about these portions. This is going to catch up all of your students, make sure that they understand the skill set needed to do this, but also the structure and form. And then the huge thing, I don't know why I didn't remember to say that, with the cultural comparison, you would have seen on the page, right? There was some text, there was some videos, some audios. So they are teaching the students are learning about these cultural products, practices, and perspectives, doing some small thinking activities, answering questions, responding with peers. Before then, they use all of that information and make that comparison.
Yeah, that is the hard part about the cultural comparison on the AP exam is there's no materials. It's just a question. And so that underscores the importance, right, of using these authentic materials and practicing these cultural comparisons with the resources, because if you don't provide those opportunities for kids to look at the products, practices, and perspectives when it comes to answering that question, when they're giving nothing, right, they will have nothing.
So I grabbed this page too, the last one, Caroline, because I didn't want you to just see the activities. This comes in the back of the chapter or the unit, and it is where you have the vocabulary and the reviews. So already there was some vocabulary that went back to the theme itself and to certain authentic materials that the students have looked, but then also they have these lovely pages, these references that go back to vocabulary used no matter the theme, but that is appropriate to these tasks. And they have them all there. Like there's the email, there's a spoken presentation, and then we have things that are perfect for contrasting ideas, comparing ideas, adding ideas. Those are going to be used in both the cultural comparison and the argumentative essay.
Yes.
Now, I think we're really close to our time.
Yep. So I'm just gonna.
So we just, yeah.
We
Oh
wanted.
my gosh, right? You have all of this stuff like leading up to AP, but then how can they just let us go? They're not. They worked on
They're
this.
not leaving us out. They are making an AP book, and we are so elated, so excited, right? So, yes, this will be on the horizon. KWL is creating this Generación AP. Cover is beautiful. We're so excited to take a look at it when it gets made. We hope we get our hands on it.
Nice one there. Absolutely. I cannot wait. Again, I hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing little sneak peeks of all of the books. I am falling in love with level 4, and I just know that the information and content in the AP book has to be so rich and
so
also
rich.
so current and relevant. That's one of the things that they do is they make sure that whatever they're pulling is not going to be easily dated. And I love that, and I appreciate that so much.
One of the things that I love about seeing this, right, is that think of all of the rich in this program. Think of all of the rich things that they've learned in level 1 through 4 that are going to lead into what they're asked to do in that book and the knowledge base that they're going to have when they get there. I mean, it's just honestly incredible. We want to just let you guys know that we will be at Actful. And we will be looking at building confidence and accuracy in AP Spanish. And so that will be Saturday, November 23rd at 1:30. So if you're going to be at Actful, come see us as we talk more about the AP Spanish exam, specifically on vocabulary. And we would love to see you there on behalf of KWL. And then our next webinar, Maximizing Student Engagement, is coming up on November 4th. So if you enjoyed this one, right, I know in November, holy cow, I'm getting a little tired. You've been teaching for 3 months. The holidays are coming up, families, things, life, right? Some of us need a little, like, how do we help our students feel engaged? Right?
So we made this at the beginning of November, before you get in the slump, whenever it's all of the high energy that you might be trying to contain a little bit. Well, instead of trying to stick that in a bottle, we're going to use your students' energy. So we're going to maximize student engagement. I think it's the perfect thing to have right before the holidays. It's whether you're celebrating any of the winter holidays or have those mini breaks at school, our kids are getting excited or anxious around those times because there's so much, and we want to be able to use their energy, turn it into a positive experience, and make it so that nobody's shutting down or just like, oh, right, we're going to keep it lively. So we hope that you guys attend that and pick up with us.
And you can always connect with us if you have any questions. We've both used Reporteros, and we have both created materials to be companions in our classroom. So you can connect with us on Facebook or on Twitter. Our collaboration is acquisition, A for Aubrey, C for Caroline. We're here for a good play on words. So that's where we came up with that. Acquisition is our goal and the first 2 letters of our name. So we were a little silly, but it's fun. And then Aubrey is Swishab and I'm Senora Schlegel on Twitter. Thank you so much for having us, KWL. I know we're right at the time, but if there are questions, I'm happy to stay.
Yeah, me too. I'm happy to stay.
Thank you so much, Aubrey and Caroline. That was very good. We can see that from the comments. So let's go straight ahead with the questions. So far we have 2. So people, if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat right now. We will try to answer them as well. So the first question we have is if you think that the feedback is possible with big classes. So for example, 28 students in a Spanish 2.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
so,
Yes.
for sure. I think when we're looking at feedback, I think we think that feedback has to be this like long, crazy, massive amount, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. It could be as simple as I think you're this based on this rubric because of this. And students can do that. You have to teach them how to do that, but students can do that. My classes are very large. I have 32 in my classes. And so, you know, when we're looking at providing feedback, I can't be the only source of feedback. Students have to self-reflect. Students have to co-reflect with a peer, and then I can provide feedback in addition to that. But providing a structure for students, teaching them how to provide feedback, how to reflect is critical when you've got classes that are really big.
If they understand how to analyze and assess somebody else's work, it's just going to make it better for themselves too. Before
Right.
they turn something in or produce something, they'll know what their goal is. If you're nervous that the students won't be forthcoming with the feedback or that they might be negative with the feedback, another thing is that you could collect the students' work and just letter them and have it coded, and it could all be anonymous feedback. So that's another thing that you can do, but the students are still having the practice of looking at maybe their own work or somebody else's work, comparing it to the rubric and the success criteria, and just evaluating honestly, how did I do, or how did this person do? Where are they with language? Where are they with their topics and their elaboration?
One of the things I started doing also with my students, and this might have been Meredith White that I saw it from on Twitter, but it was years ago. And it was, you know, do your students want corrective feedback, like their grammar and their vocabulary, or do they not? Because nothing makes you more angry as a teacher is when you spend all this time doing all of these like helpful corrections that you think will be great. And then they walk out and they put it right in the trash can, and it like pains you, right? So for me, I started asking my students, do you want a proficiency, overarching proficiency level feedback? And I can tell you why I think you're here. Or do you want corrective feedback and the proficiency level feedback, right? Not a single human in my class, in my Spanish 3 class, did not want the corrective feedback. Every single person wanted it. But the part as a teacher, right? What are we doing with it from there? Right? Where do you go from there? Because just providing that feedback isn't enough. What are we going to do to take that original version? You have to do something else with it. And I think that's a big part, you know, when we've got a curriculum and a scope and sequence and things that we have to get to, we really needs to boil down to the fact that it's about the learning and the understanding. And if that's what your kids want, they're going to grow in their capacity, even if you don't reach, you know, X, Y, or Z at the end of the term, but you spent time really figuring out what it was that they wanted to be better at as language students who are trying to understand language and
Whether
culture.
or not you are the person providing feedback or another peer is, you can ensure that your students are actually reading it and thinking about it by maybe not doing the whole big feed up, feedback, feed forward process, but definitely making them feed forward after it. So having
Yeah.
them read what their feedback is, and they can agree or disagree for a reason, but whether they agree or not, they still have to think, what are my next steps? How can I improve?
Yeah.
So what will make me go forward? And if they have that small piece, I mean, it can be a sticky note that they stick on their stuff afterwards. It'll get them into that practice, and they will have received feedback from two people, then from themselves and from either you or a peer, but definitely able to be done in those big classes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Small parenthesis. Speaking about feedback, we just put the feedback link so you guys can
Okay.
tell us more or less your thoughts. And now with the second and apparently last question is, where do you find the audio for these conversations, and if you make them yourselves? I think this was in the context of the conversación simulada, but
Uh-huh.
in general.
Yeah, I
Yes.
had seen that question. Yep. And we have sometimes we have our heritage speakers or our native speakers participate with us, like you know, calling on our ML students, pairing with our ML teachers to hear different accents. You know, we have accents from all over the world in our school. And so calling on those students to like, hey, can you do me a solid real quick? And I've got this thing that I'd really like to use, but I'd really like to have my students hear someone other than me speaking Spanish. Calling on our colleagues. I know Aubrey has called on a couple colleagues you know, hey, I need you to do me a favor. You know, will you do this? And of course they will. And it really doesn't take that long. I mean, you're recording five quick sentences essentially with a 20-second gap in between. And you know, we just call on our kids, call on our staff members. You can ask parents, reach out to your community. It's a great way to get your
Neighbors. I mean,
community.
so
Yeah.
many people are willing. You already have a script for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really fun to get different voices in there and different community members involved. I do think that it's really important, whether you are a heritage speaker, a native speaker, or if Spanish is your second language and you're teaching it, I would really, I don't know, ask you to think about having other people represented in the recordings, and not just rely on yourself, because our students, no matter where we're from and what accent we practice, they become very familiar with our voice and how we speak. And you don't want it to give them that false sense of security. So it's fine to do it sometimes. I would definitely say, yeah, do it. And it's a quick thing that you can do at the beginning or end of class. Ask some questions, put a timer on, see if they can respond. But you want to make sure that they are ready to speak to whoever is going to speak to them. So we don't want them to freeze and be like, oh, that's not what it usually sounds like. We want them to have that open mind and to, you know, take in that language, be able to process it, and have those conversations with multiple people from multiple places.
It's funny that you said that also, because I was just thinking today, I have a colleague that is from El Salvador. No, not El Salvador. She's from Nicaragua. And I have a student who is also from Nicaragua. But the paraprofessional is in my classroom during my first period, and the student is in my classroom in third period. And she came in and she started speaking, and she was like, ¿Tú eres de Nicaragua? Like, she knew immediately that this woman who is not normally in our class was from Nicaragua, just based on what she was saying and how she was saying it. And so it just, for us, it helps our students build connections with people too, thinking about, you know, there are other people in the world that we can connect with, listen to, hear. But the accent was so, she was like, oh my gosh, you're from Nicaragua. Like, I know it. But she was like, yes, I am. And they chatted, and it was great because she made that connection. It's like, okay, she'll be next on my list for the cultural comparison. Or not cultural comparison, but the simulated conversation.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so apparently that was the last question.
All
So
right.
again, thank you very much, Aubrey and Caroline. That was amazing, and I think we had a lot of amazing content. So everyone, before you leave, just spare a few minutes with us. So as Aubrey and Caroline mentioned, they are going to be in Actful, and they're also going to be on a second webinar from this series. So as Min mentioned, that's going to be on November 4th. Same time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's called Maximizing Students' Engagement Through Scaffolding with KWL Reporteros. We just put the link in case you want to join us in that one as well. Also, for those who ask, yes, you will receive all the fantastic and gorgeous PowerPoint presentation, all the slides, and the recording as well, in case you lost any bit and you want to refresh that. We will send that to you in about a week, more or less. So be patient with us, please. And as well, we put the feedback link in there again, so you can help us out with that. And finally, if you have any questions for us or for Aubrey and Caroline, please send us an email at marketing@kletwl.com. I'm gonna write that very quickly. There we go. And yes, again, if you want to also receive a sample request, we put the link. And if you need news from Generación AP, the new book that is coming very soon, hopefully. And I think that's all. So I hope you have an amazing evening. Please, girls, if you want to say anything.
No, grab those samples, and hopefully you'll come hang out with
Yeah.
us in November. We
Yeah.
look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for trusting us to present our experiences with your text.
Thank you
Bye,
for being
bye.
here. Have a
Yes.
nice evening.